With Ballin.
Hello, I'm Kevin.
And I'm Brian.
And we're just spitballing here.
So 49 years ago, man landed on the moon. And what did people do when man landed on the moon? They gathered around their TV as families, as communities. They pulled up Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in the world. CBS News, television, the most trusted man. Can you believe that? Could you imagine somebody from CNN being called that now? Never. Not the three networks or the four networks at this point. But people gathered around TV. They watched the lunar landing. They watched the Cuban Missile Crisis. They watched the World Series. I mean, baseball is kind of slowed down its run as America's pastime a little bit. But they gathered around the TV, the networks, and they watched TV. And so that's a great segue into the topic of network TV versus Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, binge watching. Before we came downstairs and recorded this first episode, what did we do?
We were watching an old episode of Futurama.
On Hulu.
Yep.
So, it is such a change. Can you imagine an event? And there have been some big ones in our lifetime. September 11th attacks. The Persian Gulf War, the first Persian Gulf War in the 90s when we were kids, it was on TV. It was, and cable news was around, but it was on television, and people gathered around, and that's where they trusted television. Cable TV totally segmented everything, and then the internet came along and totally segmented cable television, and almost is beginning to nullify or make it cable TV is almost inferior at this point. I happen to like sitting around the TV. Now, I grew up that way. I'm a sports fan. Sports are still on network TV. But I like to sit down and watch traditional TV.
Now, when you say sit down and watch it, you're talking about having to watch the clock and seeing what time it is
live
to go.
TV. Yes.
Because even the network TV, I cut the cord 3 years ago, around 3 years.
And we cut the cord about a year ago. So to give our listeners perspective, we are both cord cutters.
Yep.
So,
but the ads that I've heard, on radio and stuff, it sounds like now just about everything is kind of on demand. Like once you have your monthly subscription to Comcast or the satellite broadcast, you've got access to these shows, and they have these cumbersome things like, well, you need to click this button to say that you want to DVR every episode of this show. Mm-hmm. But it's not really DVRing it. All it's doing is giving you access to that on demand anytime after the original broadcast date.
Well, see, there's two different scenarios that you mentioned there. You could digital video record all the live episodes or the non-reruns.
Locally.
Yeah.
On your local box.
Yes.
Okay.
On your local box, you would have a physical file, which, by the way, you could not get off that DVR. They would not let you take it with you. Mm-hmm. It's theirs, because even though you're paying for it, it's on their digital video recorder. You cannot take that. You do not own that media. You can only watch that media. You can't put it on a thumb drive and take off with it. So you would have physical access to an episode of insert program here, Modern Family. There's a long-running show that most people would be familiar with. You'd have a physical episode of it, but then what it would do is it would tell you anytime there was going to be a non-rerun, because it's in syndication. It's on all the time. So any fresh new episode, it would record physically. But then, being a subscriber to Comcast or Spectrum, or again, insert your cable TV provider here, you then gain access to on demand. So you get it on both sides. You get to record the live one, but then you get access to all the prior ones as well.
Okay.
So it is on demand at that point, whenever you like it. I was a big fan of the show 24 on Fox. 24 was the Kiefer Sutherland show. He was a super agent in what I get CIA, FBI. They called it CTU, the counterterrorist unit.
One of the alphabet agencies.
Yeah, exactly. That show was on at first Tuesday nights at 8, and then Monday nights at, I forget if it was 8 or 9. They called it Appointment TV. That show has only been off the air a few years. So it probably started without exaggerating, it probably started no later than 15 years ago and ended no later than about maybe 5 years ago. I don't even think it's been that long. It's probably been closer to 10 than 15. That was still Appointment TV. You would know on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, if you wanted to watch that show, you had to sit down in front of your TV and watch it. I like that. But then again, I'm a little specific and fussy when it comes to time. So I like that. I still feel like there is a place for that in the entertainment world.
Yeah. Now, I am completely averse to that. And that's why the Netflix, I forget what they call it, when they just dump the whole season all at once, and you can consume it at your own pace. What that's done is it's eliminated cliffhangers. It's eliminated, a lot of the water cooler talk, because what are the odds any two people are going to be, at the same place in the episodes?
But tie that into the millennium generation. That's what they want, because they're not talking to people anyways.
They're not talking anyways. Yep. Yeah. Now, one of the, I'll call it a different perspective. I believe you would say you like TV more than movies.
Yeah, I do. I'm a small screen guy for sure.
And I have always been movies over TV. But a few years ago, you made me think, because you were talking about how television shows allow you to build a character, to create a longer story arc, to give you a more personal almost relationship to the characters.
Yes. Do you remember what character we were talking about? Because I remember that conversation, but I can't specifically remember.
I'm pretty sure it was Star Trek in particular, because we were talking about Star Wars versus Star Trek.
Oh, that's a great topic.
They are. But it kind of blew my mind, because I was like, well, a movie is 2 hours long.
I bet you I was talking about Jean-Luc Picard. I bet you.
Really?
I bet we were, because we probably watched one of the latest sequels from the reboot, the Kelvin timeline.
Chris Pine.
Yes, and that probably got us to talking, and I feel like I remember that conversation now.
Yeah, because it was very compelling to think, well, here's Star Wars. Every 5 years, they're throwing up another 2 hour
every 5
showcase.
Years?
Well, at the time.
Yeah.
I'm saying this is the original A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back.
Would you say that Star Wars has become one of the things we were going to talk about has become sequel fatigued? Because now they're coming out every year or two.
Everything is sequel fatigued. Yes, because nobody wants to risk the next movie. They're like, why come up with an all new idea when we've got this one here that's already got a well established name, and we'll invest our money in this safe investment vehicle. You know, this movie franchise. But boy, oh boy, it just seems like they're relying too much on these sequels. Oh my goodness.
I am not a Star Wars fan. I will say that. But every time it seems like we get together, there is another Star Wars movie for us to watch, which is why I do not go to the theater to watch them. I've not seen I've not seen the Han Solo story. That's what making his two names one. I've not seen the Han Solo story, but I think we've seen everything else now because we've seen it here with you. I'm not as big of a fan, but I don't believe Star Wars has ever ventured into episodic television. I know they had an animated show, but I don't think they've ever gotten into episodic TV, which is what I find so compelling and appealing about Star Trek. Is they have had very successful movie franchise, but now they're on their 6th television series over 55 years, and I am a huge fan of Star Trek Discovery, but Star Trek Discovery, the new Star Trek, has become a poster child for the modern way of viewing television. It helped launch what is called CBS All Access. CBS All Access is CBS's answer to Netflix and Hulu. Although, in addition, it is a subscriber service. I pay $6 a month for CBS All Access. That gives me, they have original programming. They have the Good Wife spinoff. They have the Star Trek. They had a Will Ferrell show called, it was about cops who never have anything to do. No Activity, I think it was called. I've not seen it. I've actually heard it's pretty good. I think Tim Meadows starred in it as well. But it's about police officers in a small town that never have anything to do. But, so, Star Trek was smart. They thought, you know what? Let's really, really find the young audience here. The young audience knows what Star Trek is, but let's put it on this subscriber service, and let's see how that goes. Well, it's been a very big success. I watched all 15 episodes, and we talk about character development. Many of the old Star Trek series have been individual 1-hour episodes. You have a plot, you tie up that plot, and you move on. It was not serialized. It was episodic. So episode 2 had nothing to do with episode 3, had nothing to do with episode 4. Star Trek Discovery, all 15 episodes were an arc. Okay. And it's serialized. It's what they call serialized. So it's essentially watching a 15-hour movie.
But that is exactly what Netflix is doing with all their shows. The shows that I watch, and a lot of them are, Marvel, DC Universe type things. The Fist, or I think it's Fist or Iron Fist. I think it's.
Didn't you watch The Tick?
I'm not sure. A couple episodes of the Tick. I can't recall. Yeah, I think that was the same. Where little things happen in each episode, right. But really it's the greater arc of that. But Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, all these shows are coming out, and I think you can really see in some of these episodes they are really reaching to give you a full-length episode without doing too much, because they want to focus on the major arc, knowing a lot of people are gonna sit and watch 3-4 episodes at a time.
Yeah, you can binge watch it. But the other thing, one of the reasons why I think the streaming services have been able to go serialized is because if you miss an episode, you can always watch it. You won't miss an episode per se. Like when I was watching 24, in my example, if I missed episode 6, then I have no idea what episode 7 was about. I was like, oh my gosh, I missed that. How am I going to catch up? In this style, it doesn't matter. You'll never miss it because they're all there. They're all dumped in at the same time. Now, I will give Star Trek a little bit of credit. They dumped 1 episode a week for 15 weeks. So they did, you could miss it because you could always go back and watch it. But they only dumped 1 episode a week. It was every Sunday night at 8:30. They dumped a new episode. So they kind of gave it a little bit of traditional television feel. It wasn't on the network on Sunday night at 8:30. But Sunday night at 8:30, you would get a new episode. If you missed last Sunday's at 8:30, great. You can binge the next two.
Yeah.
So, been very successful, and it is in the traditional timeline. I'm sure we'll have a Star Wars, Star Trek theme here at some point in one of our episodes, but I think that's one of the things that it's helped revive Star Trek, but it's been in this newer millennial style, if you will.
Yeah. Now, you said CBS subscription. And I know you've got a Hulu subscription you're not currently paying for. You're getting it through your phone service.
Yes, which is a great deal, by the way.
Now, do you have Amazon Prime?
We do not.
Okay. We've got Amazon Prime. I would never have paid for Amazon Prime for the shows, but we've got it for the shipping. So the shows are a happy accident. We pay for Netflix, and for music we pay for Pandora. But if you like a show that's on CBS probably isn't going to have that show on a Hulu or a Netflix, right? Aren't we going to start seeing these traditional TV stations, the networks, hoarding their own content and drawing people to their own subscription?
CBS has done that to a point, but that's because CBS is the only one of the four major networks that did not invest in Hulu.
Okay.
Hulu is owned in part by Disney, ABC, Comcast, NBC, 20th Century, Fox, and I think a very small percentage Time Warner, which would be TBS, TNT, those cable channels, CNN. CBS did not invest in that. So to a point, yes, CBS does not give up too many of their shows. They give up some of them, especially if they're no longer on the air. CBS All Access gives you access to any episode from this year's season. As silly as it sounds, sometimes I come home from work, human resources, you've had a bad day, you've had to terminate somebody, you want to turn your brain off, you just want to watch something fun. I watch episodes of The Price is Right. I've always been a big game show guy.
And that's fun.
It's fun. It's fun. I can watch any episode from this year that I want. And they've done hundreds, because they do 5 days a week.
Uh-huh.
So they've done hundreds of episodes. So any episode of any show CBS has done daytime, primetime, late night, and some of their documentaries, because they have informational, educational Saturday morning shows also. You have access to all of those. You also have access to anything that CBS owns, their library. Cheers, which was one of my favorite shows in the 80s and 90s. All of the Star Treks, because they own in the Paramount Viacom split. CBS got the TV shows, Paramount got the movies, which is why they're not currently together. So that's why they changed the timeline in the new movie sequels or prequels or whatever they are. Reboot, I guess is the right term. Isn't it funny that reboot is you've got prequel, sequel, now reboot is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because what's old is new. Will and Grace, Roseanne, Murphy Brown is coming back this year with the original characters that we knew and loved.
Wait, you say Roseanne, except for Roseanne.
Well, Roseanne, they already did their 1 year, but then she decided that she wanted to let the world know that she was a racist bigot, so she was fired from her own show, and the reboot will now be a spinoff.
Mm-hmm.
In all these terms.
Yep. And it's the Connors, right?
The Connors, yes. But that was traditional TV at its best. Roseanne actually ended up being, even though they only did about 10 episodes, April, May, June, March, April, May. I think it was March, April, May. They only did about 10 episodes. It was the #1 show on television. because now what they do is rather than just live, like what Nielsen used to register live eyeballs, now they do time shift. They'll do live plus 3.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 days after the show aired, the people have a chance to watch it on demand, watch it on a streaming service, watch it on .com, ABC, in this case, ABC.com. It counts those eyeballs for 3 days. And that's good. That ended up making Roseanne the highest rated show on television for the season. And in that, stop and think about that. As we change and evolve, this traditional show absolutely brought people into the seats, so to speak. It sold tickets for sure.
Yeah. Now, how many different subscription services do you belong to that you pay a monthly or an annual fee?
So CBS, and it's interesting you say that because I'm about to change from monthly to annual. I'm about to give them a year's worth now than a month by month because they knock 2 payments off. Instead of $6 a month, it's $60 a year. So instead of 72, it's 60. So they give you a discount. CBS I pay for. Hulu I get through my cell service, so I'm kind of paying for that. Kind of, not individually, but I'm kind of paying for that. We have access to Amazon Video or Amazon Prime or whatever that is, because my wife's mother-in-law has Prime, and she will occasionally say, "Hey, check this out." The one we don't pay for is Netflix. So we have access to Netflix, but we don't pay for Netflix.
Okay.
So Netflix is the one that I probably know the least about.
Yeah. So one of the big things that got Netflix into the streaming market is a deal with Showtime. This is when they first started streaming. They inked some deal that gave them access to anything you could watch on Showtime. Or Cinemax. I think it was Showtime. You could watch on Netflix. And after Showtime saw how popular it was, they're like, why are we letting them stream our stuff? And so they eventually they didn't renew that deal. They were stuck with it for a few years. But now you see everybody wants to, anybody with a catalog. So Disney, they had a deal with Netflix, but that expires sometime, less than a year from now. I don't know when, but Disney's walking away from Netflix, and they're gonna make you pay.
Yeah, it'll be Disney Go or so. I think they've already announced it. It's going to be Disney Go or something like that. You mentioned Netflix, not to sidetrack you, but when you first moved to Michigan and I moved to Michigan, you were big into Netflix. But what I don't think the younger generation realizes is Netflix. You remember what Netflix used to be? You have all the evidence of it over there.
Yeah.
Netflix used to literally be Redbox without the box. You would order it, it would show up in your mailbox, you would watch it, and you would send it back. And they had distribution centers all over the place to make you, if you got online and ordered a disc, it might be here tomorrow because their distribution channels were so strong.
Yeah.
That's all it was. So you're right. It was that initial investment with that subscriber service that got them into completely change the face of Netflix. And if you notice now, Netflix isn't that much about movies anymore. It is, but it's not. I thought it was interesting during last year's Super Bowl in February. I guess it was February of this year. They did an advertising blitz for the latest Cloverfield movie. It went straight to Netflix.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard it wasn't any good, but it went straight to Netflix.
Well, and a lot of this stuff, it's not going straight to Netflix. It is, they call it a Netflix original, but as I understand it, a lot of this stuff is they pitch an idea to multiple networks, and it goes to the highest bidder. And Netflix started bidding high on all these things. I thought House of Cards.
The
I, don't,
TV
I
series,
thought
yeah.
it was intended for HBO originally.
That would make sense.
And Netflix ended up being the high bidder, and extremely well made show. And it was kind of a glimpse as to what Netflix and Amazon are trying to do. They don't just want to deliver this stuff. They are looking at, okay, in order for us to get programming to them, we've got to pay the people who make it. So would we rather be on the ground floor paying to get this stuff fresh, or do we want to pay after it's already been used up? And do we always want to keep getting table scraps? Or do we want to start becoming a compelling first run content provider?
Full menu is what it is.
Yeah.
And Hulu is the exact same way. Hulu has many Hulu originals. My wife happens to be a big fan of the Handmaid's Tale, which is a Hulu original. She also likes Orange is the New Black, a Netflix original. So, yes, they want it to be. They found that if they can get in on the ground floor, they can produce something of quality. Now, back to the Star Trek example. Star Trek Discovery, the reason why it takes so long for them to produce an episode, they've been filming season 2 for months, and their first trailer came out this past weekend for Comic-Con. The reason why it takes them so long to produce these episodes is because they want it to be so visually stunning. They want you to feel like you're watching a movie. So people say, where are they getting this money? First of all, they're back from Paramount or CBS now. CBS, the corporation. But they're also backed from the All Access fees. And they were smart. They did a deal with Netflix that in the rest of the world outside the United States, including Canada, Netflix, including Canada, Star Trek Discovery airs. Well, is available, streams, like the traditional way, streams on Netflix. So Netflix is actually paying to produce, as well as CBS, paying to produce this television show, which is why it is so visually stunning. It is so attractive to the senses. The sound, the editing. They were Emmy nominated for sound effects and editing just last week. They get all this money from these. So it's interesting that they're even now using multiple streaming sources to help pay for the production of this.
Yeah.
Netflix and CBS All Access, who in the United States are competitors. Outside the United States, they are not competitors. So you've got 330 million eyeballs in the U.S., but you've got 7 billion eyeballs over the rest of the world. So of course they want everybody else to see this as well.
To be able to pay for it, yes.
Yes. To pay for it to see it, yes.
Yeah, and it's true that almost anything you watch nowadays, the production value is extremely high. Now, if you've got your brain turned off, the writing, you might not notice it, but holy smokes, when you watch some of these shows with a critical ear, you notice how bad some of the writing is. And
I'm married to an English teacher, so yes indeed.
But I mean, even plot holes and one of the things that I notice in the Netflix original, Jessica Jones and stuff, is the use of phrases and things that the writing is redundant. The banter is repeated over and over and over again, which is you can get away with it when there's at least 7 days between shows that you're watching. But
Yep.
when you're sitting down and watching 4 shows at once, you start noticing how formulaic some of the things are. But what they've really nailed down is the visual, just the beauty of the image, and it's because it's more technical. And once you learn how to do it, I don't want to say anybody can do it, but it doesn't take the creativity required to write is different from the creativity required to film and edit. And so you can have a lazy writing, but as long as you've got a well-polished presentation, a lot of people aren't going to notice it. I mean, especially how much attention are they paying when people are watching it on their phones?
You know, I did watch an episode. The internet was down one night, and it was a Sunday night, and I wanted to watch an episode of Discovery after it dropped. And I watched it on my phone, and I wasn't satisfied. So I watched it again when the internet came back on the big TV. It's funny that you mentioned that. I watched a documentary since Roseanne has been fired. Roseanne reruns were airing on some of the cable stations and some of the sub-digital stations. You know, like I think here in Detroit, 2, but then there's 2.1 and 2.3. They're the sub-channels to give cord cutters more entertainment.
Yeah.
One of the sub-channels is called Laugh. It's Laff. It's nothing but old comedies. Roseanne was on Laugh. She had this issue, and they pulled her show from Laugh, and they replaced it with Home Improvement. Tim Allen's again here, fancy here in Michigan. He was a Michigan guy. The behind I watched. So I started watching the show, and I remembered how much I liked it when I was younger. So I watched an hour-long documentary behind the making of Home Improvement, and they changed in the second or third season, fairly early on, but they had found their footing. They changed directors, and one of the producers said there was just something about the way he wanted the shot to happen. He said the producer said the director, he was so brilliant at knowing what people wanted to see. He made the show 20% funnier just by how he shot it.
The second director.
The
new.
Yes. The second director knew exactly where to place the cameras, exactly where to grab the shots, where the action should be. And Home Improvement used gags, and they used, Tim Allen was always figuring out a way to blow something up, or that was his thing, to blow something up, or he needed more power. And this new director, just according to the producers, made the show 20% funnier just by knowing where to place the cameras. That was 30 years ago. So it wasn't a big deal then. First of all, it was standard definition television, so we couldn't see the little imperfections and abnormalities that we can now see. It was standard definition television, but Home Improvement was a #1 show for 6 of its 8 years, probably because it paid attention to these details. And you're right, that's such a big deal now. That's how one show will set itself apart from the others, because back then 3 networks. Now there's 5, and now there's 200 cable channels that are also doing. A lot of them are doing individual, or a lot of them are doing original programming, and then you've got these 4 streaming services that are doing original programming. It's the golden age of producing television shows now, because there's so much original programming out there. But it's all the same. You have to set it apart from some other way. And you're right. It is how we see it. It is the visual stunningness, if you will, of it. It's how it's produced and how it looks. Discovery will not debut until January of next year, and they've got a couple episodes in the hopper already, but they're taking their time to make sure. that they look as good as they can possibly look before we see them, because we are the ones they know what we're looking for. Science fiction needs to be visually stunning.
Yeah. You mentioned 7 billion people watching stuff, and how television shows nowadays, their production value is so high, it looks like you're watching a movie. Just about everything you watch it looks like a movie. Who is going to the movies? Who is watching? We've got an Imagine Theater that's being built right now, right on the corner, just a couple of miles away from us. And I'm wondering who is providing, where's the demand for this stuff when people can now watch it on their phone, a month after the debut. Who's actually going to the theater?
Well, I think the movie industry has done a very good job of fighting piracy, of fighting the man on the corner selling the pirated discs, fighting the streaming services, giving exclusivity to certain platforms. So if you're MGM and you are making a movie, and a month and a half from now, after it's had its run in the theaters, what is the way for you to control who sees it? You sell exclusivity to Netflix, to Redbox. Redbox has even changed because now there's a Redbox on demand. You can pull up on a streaming on a Fire Stick or a Roku, which is what we have. But they've done a good job of controlling the path, because they gained, through lawsuits and through bad publicity, the movie industry as well as the music industry, because you remember Napster and BearShare and Kazaa.
Yeah.
They successfully fought the public and won. And that's what spawned Spotify and Amazon Music and Pandora. And those services wouldn't exist if the music industry hadn't successfully fought pirating and that sort of thing. The movie industry's also done a very good job of that. So there are people going to the theater, and it's because you want to see it now. In a way, the instant gratification generation, they're going to the movies for sure. Now, the movie business was down quite a bit in 2018, but then they had one of their greatest weekends ever. It was a few weekends ago, and I don't remember there was 2 or 3 movies that came out that it was $1 billion weekend. And it raised them above. It took them from, basically it was their Black Friday. It took them from being in the red as an industry to being way into the black as an industry. So people are going to the movies because of instant gratification.
Well, I have heard in the past that the movies are still one of the best date nights.
Yeah. So my wife and I do that
for young people, and I mean, this is perfect for me because this notwithstanding, I'm not much of a talker with people who I don't know.
This is not the person I know, folks.
I'm not a chit chatter. I don't do banter, and so what I heard that makes sense to me is, kids, high school, college, it's a way for you to be on a date, be close to somebody, but not have to talk for 2 hours.
It doesn't it really fit that bill?
It's so perfect. Between that and going to dinner and a movie, you got food in your mouth, so you're not talking too much during that.
If you're waiting for your order to show up, you're tapping on your internet machine, whatever mobile device you have, you are tapping. And one thing my wife and I have tried very hard to do is, we don't mind tapping, but we're going to talk to each other. We went out. We had one of our pets had an operation, so when I came home from work one night, we were like, you know what, let's just walk down to the diner down the street and get a nice breakfast for dinner, and that's what we did. So while we were there, we both had our phone. But we were playing each other in a game. So looks are not always what they appear. To the onlooker, they would have said, "Oh, look at those two older people there, not paying attention to each other."
Mm-hmm.
We were playing Words with Friends, like live. I would play bling, she'd play bling. It would be we were serving back and forth, so we were interacting with each other, and we were cursing at each other a little bit because it was a knock down, drag
competitive.
It was a competitive game for sure. Our generation is still very competitive. We care about winning and losing. And there would be a great topic for a future discussion. No participation trophy for me, thank you. I'd rather win or have nothing. But so we were playing that game, and it could have appeared that we were not communicating, but we were. So things aren't always what they seem, but for the most part, I feel like if I'm looking at a 22-year-old on a date, and you're right, they've gone to the movie, they don't have to talk, they've gone out to dinner, stuff in their face, or tapping.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfect for the generation that they are becoming.
Yeah. And the other thing, when you mentioned billions of people, I think China. And a few years ago, what were the two big movies that I noticed something very odd? Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen.
I've never seen any of those.
And The Martian.
Oh, I saw The Martian.
Those two movies had a very big China component of their storyline. And in Transformers, kind of like the whole cast of the movie goes to China. Mm-hmm. And then, a big portion of the movie goes on there.
Did they film there, or did the plot?
I'm pretty sure that the plot takes them there. It's absolutely tells you we're going to China.
And filmed on location in China, or was it on a sound stage somewhere that looked like China?
I am quite sure that it is, with what I'm going to reveal in hour 3 of the broadcast. But no, and then in the Martian, it's even more, I think, overt. The Americans are trying to save Matt Damon, who's stuck on Mars all by himself.
But
Spoiler alert.
Man, is that planet good at growing potatoes?
Yeah. So the Americans send a rocket up, and it goes off course, fails, and the Americans come groveling to China. Please help us. We need your help. And the Chinese are able to build a rocket, adapt it to the mission, and send it up, and it's successful. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed odd to me that these two movies seem to, and they've got Chinese minor leading roles.
Yep.
as these storylines enter into it. Well, then I start reading articles about how Chinese investment companies have taken a major share of the top 6 production companies in Hollywood.
Ah.
And I read that China previously had a rule that something like only 18 to 30 movies from outside the country were allowed in market.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, every movie playing at every movie theater in China is a China-made movie. So,
and they control the internet, so their
absolutely.
Population cannot see what we see.
So they have, you want to talk about controlling distribution. They absolutely had a lock on it. Well, with China held interest in Hollywood movies, now it's not so cut and dry that, this is a foreign movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if the Chinese are invested in it, it's kind of a China movie. And I have heard that a lot of the blockbuster ticket sales that we're seeing nowadays is because they no longer have a delayed introduction in foreign markets.
There's a billion people now
that they are
have
now
access.
It's a floodgate opening day everywhere, and that is causing it is preventing the public from seeing a significant decline in American moviegoing.
Well, it's funny, when we had talked about our topics, I had just heard this, and I had to look it up. Although I promised I would fly by the seat of my pants, I had to
I
look
thought we
it
were
up.
just spitballing.
We're just spitballing here, flying by the seat of our pants. But I did have to use my internet machine for one thing. The most a China made. You talked about China produced movies. A movie was out recently called Azura. Asura.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fantasy epic, and it was the first Chinese film for American cinemas. Bombed. It was a $100 million production. It made $7 million in its opening weekend and has already been pulled.
Wow.
So, they may know how to invest in American companies, but they certainly do not know how to produce a movie just yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's interesting that they have opened up their market, but they certainly have not. They've opened up their viewing market, but they've certainly not opened up their production market to in-house folks there. They may be allowing the Americans in and the British in, or whomever is petitioning to shoot on site. But as a nation, they have not successfully produced a movie for the world market yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, we didn't talk about doing this, but do you foresee anything drastic happening in the next decade in movies, in television? Like, what do you think the landscape is going to look like? A prediction.
It's very sequel and reboot heavy right now. I think that will continue. I think the reason why reboots are so successful is because our generation likes feeling that connection to something that we liked 30 years ago. So I think reboots are going to continue. Sequels will continue, but I think the movie industry is only going to it's going to separate. I think you're going to have the giant $150 million production, or then you're going to have like the $5 million production. They're going to separate so much. I think people are going to begin to enjoy the $5 million production again. The movies like Nebraska, with Will Forte, where his dad, I think it was him and his dad were traveling in a car, and it was basically, remember the movie Phone Booth? Was it Phone Booth? It was
Colin Farrell?
Yeah. All it was him in a phone booth talking. I mean, there was no production to it at all. I think you're going to start, because independent filmmakers are starting to gain access to the Cannes Film Festival, and what's the one in Colorado? I forget. There's a film festival in Colorado in the winter every year. So I think it's gonna separate. You're gonna continue with your giant blockbuster productions, but I think the small productions that don't cost nearly the amount are going to begin to grow and become more popular.
Yeah. I don't see network TV surviving past our generation. You've mentioned our generation, and I think it is that the networks are clinging to our generation because we're the last ones who accept that TV, we have to wait for it to be served to us.
And we still hold a lot of the financial clout.
Yes. Yeah. And that's another thing. The number of millennials who are in their mom's basement who, they're kind of beholden to, whoever's paying the bills of how
my house,
how
my
content
rules,
is delivered.
mister.
Yep.
I don't care if you're 33 or not.
Yep. But I think we are going to see the population of our generation, as it declines, that will bring the demise of traditionally served television.
And I think CBS All Access is the beginning of that. I think they recognize it, and I think they're trying to be ahead of the game. They do have a lot, real quickly, they do have a live TV component to All Access. CBS is going through each individual television market and making agreements with that station to allow All Access to have a live component into it. And it's based on your IP address. It's based on your location. In many of the larger markets, including Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, all the larger cities, that's already happened. For me at home, the Youngstown market, that has not happened yet. But eventually, all 220 TV markets or whatever there are now, they'll have access to that. So I think, yes, I think CBS even agrees with you. So I think that's eventually, I think we'll all be online.
Well, and you know what? I hadn't even thought about each individual market. The legal, the paperwork associated with a network distributing content to all these different markets. It is such a bureaucratic paperwork nightmare that I can't imagine, if you're the head of the network, that you're not somewhat relieved that a time is coming when you're no longer going to have these individual contracts with the different markets. But the lawyers involved in just keeping those contracts alive through all the different markets, it just seems like a waste of resources.
And to some degree, the streaming services, the non-cable cable, they have a name, but I can't remember their name, so I'll just name them by name. PlayStation Vue, DirecTV Now, which is what I am a subscriber of. That is my non-cable company cable television. The cord cutting, it's streaming cable. They are also making individual contracts with the individual markets to have live TV built into that. I have 60 channels for $50. Way cheaper than it would be if I had Spectrum TV, traditional cable. Eventually, all five now of my live channels in the Youngstown area will be on DirecTV Now. That might help the individual affiliates stay alive, but I don't know if it will help the individual networks stay alive. I should say the networks stay alive in those affiliates.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've come to the end of a as we've done this, especially when we talked about dinner and a movie, I thought about you and me being across from each other at a diner, and somebody sitting at the booth behind us and just listening in. That's what's happening. That's kind of what I
and calling us whippersnappers, even though we're in our 40s.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of what this podcast is. It's people who don't hear people talking to one another have a chance to eavesdrop on a couple of Gen Xers.
I was just going to say, Mr. Furley from Three's Company's hiding behind that door over there.
Well, I was thinking of a younger person, not an older person who's just grumbling about their arthritis or something. But I that's what I think the power of this is that, it's not that we're right or anything. It's that we actually know enough to have an opinion that's not just fed to it. Well, somebody said this, so I'm going to parrot what their opinion is. So
it's an educated opinion. We heard something and we probably investigated it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, here ends our
debut episode.
The debut episode.